I'm Daniel Malarkey, and I am thrilled to be here. I run an art advisory, and I help clients purchase contemporary art, and also I work with them on collecting important design. I'm very happy to be here for Makepeace. We can start with Fetish, Vase by Axel Salto. What makes his work so interesting is, number one, he hand-built it. He was really working on the idea of budding vases and creating sculpture. And because he came from a painting background, he met Matisse, Picasso in Paris, and then starts this modernist publication. So his mind is very much deeply interested in what's going on with modernism. But then you take that, put it to the side, and then you have clay in front of you, and he's sculpting. And he created these most beautiful masterpieces. With the Fetish vase, for example, there are different ones that he made, and the Met has one, for example. So if you bought this Fetish vase, you'd have an example of a piece that's also in the Met. And this piece is actually from Jackson Design. But I think it's a beautiful example of his work. I would be very happy to have it myself. So this cabinet by Joseph Frank, it's from Modernity Gallery, and what I love about the cabinet, first of all, if you know his work, a lot of the cabinets of this number were with veneered mahogany, but this one has this beautiful cherry and root veneer, and so that's just incredible. And it's not just the front of the cabinet. When you open it, on the inside doors you also have it as well. Then there are these trays you can pull out, and it's beautifully hinged. Everything about it is beautiful, including the proportion of it. But Joseph Frank is also interesting for me because he came from Austria and goes to Sweden in the early 30s, and then he develops into his style of furniture design becomes modern, but it's not modern in the sense of throwing out history in a sort of Corbusier style. He's actually takes history and reinvents it in a new way. And also what's really important is he did, for example, very famous Burr coffee tables. But coffee tables were really invented in the mid-20th century. Before that, we always had these high tables in the middle of the room and then side tables dotted around. So you'd have flowers. You couldn't speak to someone across the room. You just gossip to the person next to you. So I think people gossiped more then too. But the thing is that Joseph Frank, his style was, on one hand, he did these floral patterns and fabrics, or botanical, you could say, botanical patterns in fabric, which are very colorful. And then he has another style which is more sort of pared down in color and just very beautiful, that can, I think, sit really nicely in any interior. They're very attractive chairs. They have 3 legs. They look like they might not be stable, might not be strong. For someone who's 100 kilos, if you're sitting down, you might think, oh no, but actually inside of them, they're enforced with steel. I was at the gallery, Sarah Meyerskopf, and I sat in the chairs, and I have to say, and I was with John Makepeace, who is a great, great man in many, many ways, but I sat in the chairs, and they hold your back at the perfect space. The way that the seat has been cut is perfect for the human body. So he's made the chair to fit a human, almost like a bodysuit. It's engineered like a car. And what's interesting when I spoke with him, number one, rarity, we don't always know in the past how many were made. But they've only made, I think, around 10 to 15 of these chairs. Each one's unique. There's also one of them in particular that Sarah has, I think, on the Makepeace exhibition, which is a cloud back, but there's a hole in it. So I asked John, I said, why is there a hole in the chair? He said, well, there was a defect in the wood and I didn't want it there, so I got rid of it and made a hole. And I think one day, in history, when that chair goes up for auction, let's say at Christie's or Sotheby's in 100 years and makes a fortune, people may not know that story. And I think it's really important as well that these stories, and maybe this video will keep that story alive. These stories become part of the piece. And that's what makes these objects at Makepeace so important. I chose Michelle Okano's table, the Radiant table. So first of all, the table's large, and I think it's really important with anything with design to describe it. So it's about 2 meters, almost 2 meters in diameter. It's the biggest Radiant table she's ever done. She's done them at different sizes. What's interesting about the table is first of all, at first it looks almost brutalist because of the strength of that singular base, the volume of it, and even the texturization. But then the top, you have this radiant pattern, which goes from out to in, but the energy is going to flow into the middle of the table, and then it shoots out to all the different radiants. So why this is interesting as a table is tables we circle around as people, and you create a sort of cohort of people or a congress who are then in dialogue. So what she's done with this table actually, in terms of the energy flow, is she's creating energy that moves from point to point around the table, which creates a super dynamic table that has loads of energy. So I chose Vincenzo Dakotis' light from Carpenter's Workshop. And I've been looking at his work for some time. And what I really like about his work is he uses a lot of recycled materials. He has this sense of things aging in time. He's a contemporary, you could say he's an architect. He does interiors, but he also calls himself an artist. I think sometimes people throw that word artist around, but what's really important here is he's created something which is by itself a sculpture. So I can see it without an interior as its own being, and that is sort of an artist's mind. What's interesting is he uses this hematite, which is, this beautiful stone, which is almost like a marquetry the way he's done it. You have to look really close, zoom into the images, and you can see it, and in person would be even better. But then he has polished brass, which is a really beautiful material, and then a smoky glass, kind of antiqued, where the light comes through. So he's thought about the fact that he didn't want to create some sort of sculpture that almost looks like it could be somehow ancient in some way, and then throw a really fluorescent new light. He wanted to make a light that felt it was linked to the actual piece. But I was really attracted to this piece. First of all, the height, it's 150 centimeters. And I like the idea of it almost being like a bow. So it has this kind of image of the bow, which takes us to, I don't know, elves in Lord of the Rings, or a different time, a fantasy world. But then you forget the bow, and it suddenly becomes a piece of contemporary sculpture. So actually it doesn't transport you fully to some sort of fantasy world, but takes you into a quite, I would say, an intriguing moment in the present that is linked to something deep in our psyche in the past. So I like the idea of end of night, you're playing cards with people in this room, staying up late to the early hours, and there's this incredible sculptural lamp in the corner. And I see it there, and I think it's a great work to collect. I can see it in so many people's interiors, whether it's somewhere in the countryside or in a very contemporary apartment in the city. But his work is really incredible, and I like it more and more every year. So he's definitely ahead of the curve. When I chose my 5 pieces, I imagined these 5 pieces in the same room. And so I love the idea of the John Makepeace chairs around this table, even if you might think they're very different. And then the Joseph Frank cabinet, the Axel Salto on top of the cabinet, the Vincenzo light in the corner. So all of these pieces actually kind of fit together, very strong energy.